A bilateral relationship sparked by a shared vision, in the words of the minister. And it's interesting to follow how this would affect the whole African sub region. Now, over $50 billion has been earmarked as military aid, 7,000 military personnel to be trained, and not forgetting a currency swap worth $2 billion between Nigeria and China. This has sparked more discussions on how this bilateral relationship can rid the African region from unwanted Western influences. Now, in keeping with our conversation, Chijoke, moving on to our next conversation this morning, it's off the back of this that we invite.
Well, certainly, we will be having our main discussion this morning. Doctor, it's wonderful to have you in the studio.
Yeah, good morning.
And I'm sure you must have listened to the minister, Tuga, talking about the bilateral relations and all of that Nigeria hopes to have with China. Firstly, what are your thoughts with regards to this when you listen to the press briefing?
Well, the visit of the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is a very, very important visit. Wang Yi is not just a foreign minister. The foreign minister of China is a member of the political bureau, which is one of the highest decision-making of the Communist Party of China. And he is a very, very high caliber personality as far as the Chinese government is concerned.
Yes.
So coming into Nigeria at this particular point in time, which is a normal ritual that the Chinese do annually by visiting African countries every January or early period of the year. That has been very consistent for the past 3 to 4 years. With the choice of Nigeria as one of the key area to visit is very instructive. Don't forget that he also visited Chad, Congo, and some other countries.
African countries.
Yes,
as well.
and some other African countries. This underscored the importance that China attached to Africa and is willing to engage with Africa. And just like the minister has said in the prologue, where China has been investing heavily. At the last year's FOCAC, about $50 billion have been earmarked, which our president clearly has said is not enough. That just like Oliver Twist, we are asking for more.
Well, Doctor, in asking for more, just before you walked into the studio, we were having a conversation with Honorable Clayton Zabun, and one of the things he raised was the fact that this sort of partnership or collaboration, between Nigeria and China is one that is more in-depth rather than the peripheral, deals, bilateral relations or whatnot that we have always been seeing in the past. It's more touching on the grassroots than just at the surface level. Do you share the same thoughts? And how big of an impact will this have on one, on our economy, and secondly, our fight against insecurity in the country with the proposal of training of about 7,000 military personnel across Nigeria and other African countries?
Yes, China's investment in Nigeria and specifically in Africa has really been very, very rewarding. It has not. It is a clear departure from what we have experienced under the Bretton Woods institutions.
Yes.
The World Bank and the IMF, where we pay very humongous amount of money as debt servicing and other incentives. So China provides a very good alternative to these Western capitalist lending institutions. And with the coming in of the BRICS, and that is why you see a lot of countries itching to join the BRICS, which China clearly is the main leader. And if you look at the last FOCAC, 50 African countries all went to meet with President Xi Jinping in China. And that is also a very loud call. On the home front, the impact on the domestic Nigerian economy, just like you said during the prologue. Nigeria has been benefiting tremendously. Look at the Abuja International Airport, which was remodeled. Look at the various road projects from Abuja to Makurdi down. Look at the various road projects that the Chinese government has been doing. And like our president said yesterday during the visit by the Chinese foreign minister, the currency swap deal, which has been there since 2018, has had a tremendous impact on the Nigerian economy.
Yes.
This is because a third-party payment, like in dollars, is being eliminated. So we trade with the Chinese currency and then with the Nigerian currency in a swap deal. This has by and large been very, very instrumental. Is also stabilizing the currency of both countries and also eliminating over-reliance
On the dollar.
on the dollar.
Well, is there a reason why the president, just like Oliver Twist, wants more instead of the $2 billion trade deal? He's seeking for a $5 billion dollars deal following the visit of Wang Yi.
Yes, Nigeria, we need this type of incentives. Don't forget that Nigeria has been giving China a lot of incentives in our relationship with China. Many of Chinese companies operating in Nigeria have been given tax breaks.
Yes.
Export processing zones, tax-free havens have been created. The Lekki Free Trade Zone. We also have the Chinese $33 billion brass industrial park, and several other encouragement given to the Chinese investors to invest in the Nigerian economy. And China is seizing that opportunity. There is a lacuna. China has a lot of advantage in our trade relationship. In 2023, about $22.5 billion in trade between Nigeria and China, which is very, very
Quite a
huge.
humongous amount of money
And then about 2.7 billion in Chinese investment
into the country.
in Nigeria. So it's a very rewarding partnership, creating jobs, transferring technology to us. Many Chinese engineers are working in Nigeria and they are workers there in Nigeria. And so it's a very, very rewarding relationship. The only thing is a note of caution. As I always say, there's no country that is Father Christmas. China has a lot of interest in maximizing this relationship for her benefits.
Yes.
And we have to also be very, very cautious. We have to look at the nitty-gritty of whatever agreement or MOUs that we are entering with China, so that it will not have a devastating impact in the future. Because you know that every superpower or every economy, foreign economy, will also want to exploit or use an opportunity to further its own nest. So we also have to be wary and suspicious and also be cautious in this relationship.
I would like to re-echo this call for caution, like you're saying it, and it's from the angle of the fact that no relationship is perfect. It all starts out very lovey-dovey, but then again there are some fractured relationships with a little quarrels here and there and infightings. In terms of Nigeria and China, some of the infightings have not been by the two nations generally, but from the activities of nationals of these two countries within our demographic space. Here in Nigeria, we can go far back as 2021 when it came to the obvious attention of Nigerians that the activity of certain Chinese nationals in the operation of their business infringed on certain laws, environmental laws. I know when there was a bomb blast in Ibadan as well, illegal mining accusations. Here in the FCT, the FCCPC had to close down a Chinese store. Just some days back again, NAFDAC had to also close another store for certain infractions and infringements. Many look at it from the overarching need to protect the Nigerian interest from exploitation. China, most times when you speak to some lay persons on the road, they say that they have a greater influence. That's why we're seeing some minimal infrastructural development. This call for caution, in line with some of these examples I've cited, how important is it for the agencies of government saddled with ensuring compliance to not be deterred by the two nationals who have shaken hands yesterday at the Aso Villa in line with these infractions that happen at the grassroots?
Yes, that is why initially I said it's an unequal relationship. China, the trade volume between the two countries is running into deficit. We are a bit disadvantaged. And China basically is here in Nigeria and many African countries in search of raw materials to feed their numerous industries. So through their road and silk initiative, they've been able to penetrate many of the rural areas in many African countries. And because of that, a lot of people have been complaining, a lot of citizens have been complaining of the brutalization. Don't forget that Chinese is communist, or they are not a democratic nation, as the case may be. So they might not have, in the way they carry out their activities,
Yes.
might undermine the Western understanding of human rights and so on. So a lot of citizens have complained about the high-handedness, just like you have said, of the Chinese, especially in labor laws, in labor issues with citizens. Also the crude methods of their mining activities, and also their lack of willingness to employ top engineers of countries where they are operating. Most times they prefer to come with their
own engineers.
With their own
which is one thing Nigerians
artisans.
have always frowned on.
Yes, an artisan, and because we need this, we have the manpower, we have the qualified people. So whatever agreement we are entering, we also have to look at the interests of our people. But the major point you raised on the issue of monitoring and on the issue of superintending over Chinese activities. Yes, the Standard Organization of Nigeria, the NAFDAC, and several other regulatory
SCCPC.
Federal regulatory agencies, they have to up their game. The Chinese are very, very shrewd, very, very wise, and they have had their own ways of trying to undermine whatever we are doing. And most people believe that many Chinese products are fake, or they try to mimic,
substandard.
Yes, or substandard, to mimic products. So you hear Chinese phones are not original. But again, I was discussing with somebody yesterday, and he told me that the blame should be on Nigerians.
Why so?
That Nigerians go to China, and China will say, look, this product is $10, it's original. This one is $3, it's not too good.
It's a little bit inferior.
Then this one, then the Nigerians will say, if I bring a shirt here at 100,000, nobody is going to buy. So they will prefer the lower quality one, and they make the order, and the Chinese will be willing to produce for them, so that they. But it is now left for our regulatory agencies to ensure that such products, such low quality products, are stopped from being imported,
gaining access into the country.
Into the
I much agree with you, especially in the NAFDAC incidences. The violations were traced to the labeling, much of which was done in Chinese.
Yes.
And even when the review was made, such of the grading in terms of the machinery, the reverse is the case. Whilst here in Nigeria, you might see the color code of green being the most superior. Over there, red is the most superior, and here red is always connoted with danger. I mean, these challenges with especially language barrier, they've also blamed the entrance into our ports, saying that if the officials manning those entrances are more prudent in the delivery of their duties, those products won't gain interest. So I see reasons why you say Nigerians are to blame. In line with this, it's also on the call for them, on one hand, to also have stores in which their nationals living here can patronize at ease. In finding this balance, which I believe is one of the key words where diplomacy stands out, how would you advise the government going forward?
Yeah, the government should ensure that most of the imports from China, because of the labeling in Chinese language, even yesterday, I was saying that no, China, they are too much. How can the foreign minister be speaking in Chinese language?
In their own language.
I don't want to believe that the man do not know how to speak English. I don't want to believe. But you see, China, one of the things that have made China a very important country in the international system is they are holding up to their culture. Language,
and their values.
Yes, language, ways of life, and every other aspect of their lives. I wish we could, in Nigeria, devise such unique way of doing our things. If you look at most of the countries that have succeeded in the world, they hold on to their culture, they hold on to their language, and they have no apology to anybody for that. And I think that is one area that we need to look at. Most of the agreements that we are signing with China, we have to really get experts who can really look at it, translate it in a way that the clauses that may be very injurious to us in future are identified. And I don't know whether some of these our agencies really have well-trained Mandarin experts who could really look at some of these products that are coming in and be able to decode some of the Chinese inscriptions on most of these products and be able to assist us.
Well, I believe there are quite a number of Nigerians who are studying in China who can boldly assert that they can understand, read and write in Mandarin. And do you think that maybe in employing the services of even the students themselves or graduates who have gone through some sort of education in China or any Asian country could go a long way in sorting out this bottleneck? Because as simple as it appears, it is causing a huge issue when it comes to the product value chain and all of that for products coming in from China into the country that are not labeled properly in a language that we can understand, which is English.
Yes, just like you said, in many universities in the country now, Mandarin language is being taught. Many Nigerians are trying to understand those language, the Mandarin language, and we also have the China Cultural Center here in
Abuja, yes.
Yeah, where those who have interest can go and learn Chinese language. This is very important. So students, individuals, those who have flair for languages, yes, they can seize those opportunities and learn these languages. That would be very helpful, especially in trying to strengthen Nigeria-China relationship by looking at how Nigeria can leverage on the language barrier or the between Nigeria and China in terms of relationship.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about military strength now. We all know how we have been battling as a nation with insecurity, banditry, and terrorism and all of that. And it is one thing that has always been on the table for us as Nigerians, how to curb, not completely eradicate now, which is very impossible, but to stem down to a very large extent the issue of insecurity in the country. And with the recent visit of Wang Yi and the proposal to train about 7,000 military personnel, how much of an impact will this have on our fight against insurgency and terrorism in the country, in your opinion, Doctor?
Well, every opportunity to have our military personnel trained and to have support from international partners will go a long way in curbing the state of insecurity that we have in the country. So any attempt by any of the foreign partners to give support is welcomed.
Yes.
Training 6,000 troops is huge, and we hope that when those troops are trained, they should be deployed to areas where this insurgency is happening. About 1,000 policemen are also to be trained. China has one of the best internal policing mechanisms that you can see, an anti-corruption policy. So China, our police being trained in that place, and our troops facilitating their training will be very, very helpful in our fight against insurgency. One thing that struck me was the attack on the Chad presidential palace during the visit of the Chinese president to Chad, and a lot of fingers were pointing at Boko Haram insurgents or bandits, as the case may be, who took a daring attack on the presidential villa. I think that will leave an impression on the Chinese foreign minister on the need for them to assist countries grappling with insurgency and terrorism in Africa. China is the second largest country in terms of defense budget after the United States. So they have a very well-trained professional military. They have very good naval fleet. They have very good equipment, military hardware, and several other things. So we will have a lot to benefit. Our military have a lot to benefit from China's military capabilities. Though China has maintained a very low profile in terms of
military strength,
military warfare. They have a strength in military, but they have a deliberate policy not to engage in warfare.
And why do you think this sort of policy is in play at the moment?
They want to just concentrate on economic development. You know, war can devastate a particular country. They just believe that they should not get entangled into warfare that will reverse most of the gains that they have achieved economically. China, as at 1980, was almost Nigeria was more developed than China.
Yes.
But within how many decades they have been able to become one of the leading economies in the world. This is because they concentrate more on how they can enhance their economic development rather than warring and so on and so forth. So they believe that by the time they expand their economic base, they will be able to enhance the well-being of their people in their country.
Let's talk more on this expansion of their economy base, especially into African countries. I remember a global consulting firm made a publication about the undocumentation of Chinese firms operating in Africa. And particularly in Nigeria, was worrying that out of 930 Chinese companies, only 317 were registered with the Chinese Ministry of Commerce. Now, this growing trend of evading registrations and not declaring profits is only pertinent in Nigeria, unlike other African countries in Ethiopia and South Africa, where they have higher level of engagements between their governments and the Chinese governments. Do you think that these three new kids, I'd like to call them on board, talking about Tanzania, Kenya, and Nigeria, that are looking to get on the level of South Africa and Ethiopia, can achieve this particularly with ensuring that registrations and declaration of profits are maximized?
Well, I think it's just because of the shoddy way we do our things in Nigeria. Ordinarily, no business should operate in Nigeria without being registered. But Nigeria is a country where anybody can come and circumvent the laws and get away freely. But if we know that if we ensure that no country operates without the necessary registration, those companies will not be able to operate. So there are a lot of lapses in our registration process for companies, and this is where the CAC and other regulatory agencies need to up their games, so that no company either from China or anywhere in the world come into the country and begin to operate without the necessary legal
requirements and documentation.
Yes, and documentation. So I agree with you that yes, countries like Ethiopia, countries like Kenya and others, they've been able to surmount that hurdle because of the way their company registration procedures are structured, and we need to also look at what they were able to do that. In Nigeria, anybody can come into this country
and begin operating a business
and begin to operate business unchecked. Our borders are porous. Our systems. Many of our systems are very porous and are susceptible to.
Sir, just to add to that, do you think it's from the culture where foreigners are somewhat glorified in Nigeria, especially on the angle of the way our security personnel treat them? I don't know if you've had the experience, but many Nigerians have lamented their experience dealing with security personnel as a Nigerian to Nigerian and the way they are treated. And at that same instance, you see a foreigner walk through the screening process and they are somewhat given an easy pass.
Well, it boils down to the issue of corruption, which we talk about in Nigeria, where the Chinese have a lot of resources that they can throw around. So, and in Nigeria, you know what happens. Once you have these resources and you have the capability of throwing it around.
Everybody dance to your tune.
Yes, you can walk through anywhere and circumvent any process. Even look at the expatriate quotas, for example. Chinese companies, they are supposed to have a limited number of expatriates that they can bring in. But you see that most of the Chinese companies, they bring engineers, artisans. So I doubt
you can even barely tell the difference between a government official and just an artisan.
Yes.
You know, imported into the country from China.
Yes, I doubt whether many of them have expatriate license to come and practice their trade in Nigeria, or whether they are subjected to our regulatory bodies. We understand that many of them are just mere artisans. They are not even qualified engineers, yes. As the case may be. So bodies like Koren, Nigeria Society of Engineers, and others should look into to ensure that most of the people coming in are actually not quacks, as we understand. But you see, like he said, anything foreign, when Nigerians
is well accepted by Nigerians.
Yes, by Nigerians. We have a craze for foreign people. Actually, our local engineers, our local artisans could even be better than what those people are offering. But because of our system, so we need to do a lot, give ourselves confidence that we can do it. But you must also give it to the Chinese. The Chinese have been able to do a lot, especially in transferring technology from the West. They've been able to replicate most of the things to the extent that they've been able to establish companies that could compete favorably. Their products would compete favorably with products from the US and other developed economies.
Even especially in the area of infrastructure development. That brings me to my next question. In Abuja and other cities in Nigeria, credits to them, some of the brilliant constructions you see around are done by them. Yes. This brings into conversation the Panda bonds, which the president was very vocal about following Beijing's pledge. How important are these bonds? I don't know if you care to explain to our viewers the role it would play in strengthening infrastructural development in Nigeria.
Yes, bonds are very important when you want to, and Nigeria has a very big deficit in terms of infrastructural development. Most of our roads are not good, and I'm happy that the Chinese Exim Bank and several other Chinese interests have been trying to fix our roads, our airports, and most of the infrastructure. The area that I would have wished for China to go in is in the area of energy. how we can improve our energy power grid and so on, transmission and generation. But they've done a lot even in terms of technology in their telecommunication. The ZTE,
which is set for a tariff hike in anytime soon. I mean, Nigerians have been crying all over the place.
Yes, if it were not for Chinese companies,
yes.
Many Nigerians wouldn't have had the prices of telephones crashed. The ZTE and many of the Chinese brands was able to force other competitors like Samsung, Nokia, and others to
to crash
their price so that phone, because the Chinese brand gave an alternative to people. Even though when you use the Chinese phones, people try to mock you, but it filled the value.
But I mean, most Android phones are Chinese phones.
Yes, it made the phone very affordable, which is very, very good. So, with the question he has asked, these bonds are needed.
Yes.
And because of the low interest rates on these bonds, it's very attractive for developing countries like Nigeria to access these bonds, and they have long-term moratorium. So when these bonds are gotten, it can be used because of the long-term and the low interest. It's very, very attractive, more attractive than the ones that are the loans that are being given by the World Bank and the IMF, as I said earlier.
Yes.
So many African countries are falling over themselves to access
those panda bonds.
Yes, these panda bonds.
Well, there is a story on the Standard Times Nigeria. Now, I know this is not necessarily in terms of strengthening diplomatic ties, but however, in line with FDIs. Let's digress a little bit. Let's see if we can pick up a copy of the Standard Times Nigeria and have that headline in story, and then have Dr. Omale here react to the headline. The Standard Times Nigeria comes up in just a short while. Take a look at the headline story with the catchphrase FDI in red. Africa Energy Bank selects Abuja for $5 billion investment. Now, this is all there is to it, Doctor. $5 billion in the FCT for investment.
Yes. This is $5 billion is not small.
It's not. I mean, it runs in trillions of naira.
Yes, and for that kind of money to be invested in Abuja for the purpose of energy, that is very heartwarming. We just pray that these projects and these investments are done in such a way that it can, just like the electricity company in Aba.
Yes.
We hear that there are 24 hours light now in Aba.
In Abia State.
In Abia State. So if we can get that done in the FCT, and I believe it will have a multiplier effect, not just for the FCT.
Now, Doctor, the reason why I had read out this headline story is due to your recent comment about, wanting the electricity or power situation in the country to come to a stable, position. With this now and other indices that we're looking at across the country, do you think that there is hope for Nigeria's power sector or energy sector in general? Well, if more investments like this will pour in?
Yes, a lot has been done, and a lot also need to be done.
Yes.
I think what we need to increase our power grid, especially in terms of generation and distribution. I laugh when we talk about 6,000 megawatts, 7,000 megawatts, where countries like South Africa are about 30 megawatts, many other, Egypt, many other countries. So we are still struggling with 6,000 megawatts. 7,000 megawatts.
And being a very populous nation.
Yes, and so in terms of power, we need to do a lot in all areas: generation, transmission, distribution. We need to do. Many of our distribution infrastructure are obsolete. So with this type of money being pumped in, if if only we can get certain areas right, like Abuja, it will free a lot of power for other areas. And then if we can start small, by the time in the next 10 years, we develop like 3 or 4 states, we move again. After a year, we move to another to help stabilize our power system. So I'm very glad with this $5 billion for Abuja. And also, let me also state that a lot has been done in Abuja in the last 2 to 3 years. The road networks that have been abandoned have been completed. You see, Abuja is taking its rightful place.
Should we say kudos to the FCTO 01?
Well, I cannot, you see, you cannot attribute it just to an individual.
Yes.
It's a holistic thing. Some of the projects have been even awarded before the current minister has come. It's just that maybe it's a time frame. So, but he has summoned the courage to complete these projects. The Chinese are pumping money into the Kano Port Harcourt Railway remodelization projects.
Okay.
So there are many projects apart from this 5 billion for energy. There are many other projects that will touch the lives,
certain key areas
of the Nigeria economy. Yes. And I think railway is key. Railway transportation is very, very key.
And that will perhaps also lessen the burden on our highways or expressways in the country that have gone through a certain dilapidation due to the influx of trailers and all of that.
Yes, we are not. Most of the goods that we transport on roads are actually
for real
supposed to be transported through the rail. Even our petroleum products, if we have a very good railway network, Port Harcourt, Kano, Calabar, all the areas are linked by railway transport. We will see fewer tankers on the road loading fuel. We will see fewer trailers on the road carrying heavy iron rods, containers, and so on. All this,
which also cause accidents.
Yes.
and casualties on our highways.
All this will be transported through the railways. So
now, Doctor, let's come back to this power issue, because it's exciting that there's been money budgeted for improved power supply and energy particularly. But the challenge here, especially with most Nigerians reacting to the consistent collapse of our power grid, is the fact that the power sector obtained $3.2 billion loans to rejuvenate it, but we're still falling below 4,500 megawatts thereabouts in our quest to even get to 6,000 megawatts, which you said earlier on is laughable. The Minister of Power, Chief Adebayo Adelabu, has made certain excuses, vandalism, challenges here and there. But honestly, in all sincerity, how would you rate his performance and our quest to boost our power generation in the country?
You see, the power sector remains a sore point in this country. From the Obasanjo regime, where we heard that 17 point something billion dollars was expanded on the power holding, on the NEPAs at that time. The name has been changed to power holding. We have been still be grappling with the electricity problem. Now we have band A, band B, band C, and all kinds of bands we have. So it's like the power sector reforms is defiling any solution. This is because a lot of money is being made from the power sector. The power sector remains one of the most corrupted arm of government in the country. And that is why, despite all the money being pumped into that sector, we hardly see any
tangible
result. I did a study on the privatization of the power sector some times ago in Karo local government or Nasarawa state, and we didn't see any improvement since the power sector was privatized. Most of the companies that became Gencos or became transmission companies, they are not doing as much as they are supposed to do. They just electricity company, and most of the electricity companies that bought these privatized companies, they are not really performing the way they should, and that is why we are where we are today. Yes, they will tell you if your transformer is bad, don't contribute money to fix it. But if you don't contribute money to fix it, you will be in darkness for a very long time. There are communities that have been in darkness for the past 1 year.
Because they have refused to contribute money to fix their transformers.
Yes, because they have. So you see that there's a lot of problems in the power sector, and I just pray that Mr. President takes this issue of power. If it's just that one thing that can be solved by the Tinubu government in the next 2 years, remaining years, Nigerians will applaud the government sincerely, because what the power brings to the economy is huge. Small scale businesses will thrive, cost of doing business will reduce, cost of providing your own energy. Sometimes I feel for hotels and small businesses that use power. The operating costs, 80% of the operating cost is taken by provision of energy.
Yes.
Why we are even having some breather now is the massive investment in solar and other renewable energy,
All forms of energy,
which China is still part of the driving force. These days, people hardly use batteries that we know in the past. People now use solar panels to charge.
Lithium batteries.
Yes, lithium batteries. People now use rechargeable torchlights. And all these are facilitated by China. China has contributed significantly to clean energy in Nigeria and many other parts of the world, and you cannot take it away from the Chinese. They've been able to look at areas of needs of developing countries, and they have been able to key in by fabricating things that are needed to fill the void, especially in the area of energy.
Yes.
These days, if you go to various homes, there are various packages, solar packages, that the Chinese have developed, which is helping our energy sector. At individual homes, these days there are solar bulbs that can take one TV, I think some phone,
Yes.
and several other package that the Chinese have designed, which
It's very commendable.
Even rechargeable bulbs and all of that.
Yes,
just
rechargeable
retaining
bulb,
energy and
yes.
for you to use even when there's no power supply.
Yes.
Now, the world in general, Dr. Omale, is gradually tilting towards electric cars in most developed countries. And even here in Nigeria, you drive around the city of Abuja, you see Tesla cars, which are electric vehicles. You see businessmen importing EVs from China for the usage of, for the purpose of public transportation and all of that. However, the major bottleneck is power supply. Electricity. I was watching an interview recently where someone said that to charge up his Tesla EV from 0 to 100 will take him about 8 hours and 16,000 naira worth of electricity units. And then he could drive the vehicle for about 450 kilometers or so before the battery runs down, which is a very good catch if you ask me. However, if we are going to transition just like the rest of the world until towards electric vehicles, we need to address the issue of power. Do you share the same thoughts?
Of course, I've already said earlier that power is very critical for any economic development of this country. And that is why I said that for Nigeria to be able to take its rightful place as the largest economy in Africa, We have to solve this issue of power. And I have also said that if that is the only thing this current government in Nigeria can focus and give to us, it will really appreciate it, because power will turn around this huge economic potential that we have in Nigeria. We're talking about creation of Ministry of Livestock. We're talking about diversifying the economy to agriculture and all this. You can't do that without power. Many of the agricultural produce that we are producing now, they are being damaged and destroyed because we don't have the cold room chain to preserve most of these vegetables and most of these perishable agricultural products.
Yes.
So you need power to do all this, and even milk from cattle, preservation of meat, and several other things. So we should go beyond just creating ministries, creating agencies of government. The fundamental things that need to be done, transportation, energy, we need to really focus on that. And like we talked about the electric cars, how do you drive from Abuja to Lagos, which is clearly more than 400 kilometers?
Certainly.
At a point, you need to recharge. It's almost 1,000 kilometers.
1,000
so
kilometers.
where are you going to recharge during that journey? Where are you going to see power? Where are you going to see charging points?
Even here in the FCT, there are just a few scantily,
Yes.
spots where you can recharge your electric vehicles at certain cost.
Of course, yes. And the president has brought this CNG initiative, which is very, very costly. And also we hear that the CNGs are also very risky. So I am at a loss whether to transit to CNG or to transit to electric vehicles. Which one?
Well, I've been informed that sadly we have to draw our conversations to a close. But I wish time would permit for us to review a lot, especially with the call for a currency swap of way in the margins of $2 billion between Nigeria and China. But subsequently, within the coming weeks, we'll look to have this conversation. We must say thank you to Dr. Omale Matthew for taking our time to so graciously review these developments in light of the recent meeting between Nigeria and China to strengthen bilateral relations. But this is where we draw the curtains to a close. From myself, Bito Brian, and
Chijioke Okafor. Well, Vito, I thought you forgot my name. Thank you so much. This is where we wrap it up on today's edition of Morning Express.